Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're talking about orchid flowers, specifically things you should never do to orchid flowers in order to enjoy them for longer. Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of high-quality classes for people who are always eager to learn something new. Such as us orchid geeks, am I right? This is the right place to get inspired and expand on your existing skills or learn new ones and put them to work in your everyday life. From photography to drawing, cooking, and even how to grow houseplants, there's always something interesting to discover. So I am continuing my How to Cook Better journey by learning some sauces. And you guys, I found a class by none other than Khalees. Yes, the Khalees. I know! I was not aware she was also a chef. I only knew her as a songwriter and performer. But yeah, there is a class about preparing sauces made by Khalees, and I loved it. Very beginner friendly, and it gives you an extra boost of confidence. Plus, some extra tips about mixing flavors as a bonus. I went for sauce recipes because, between you and me, they're easy and they can go on everything. I don't really need to be a chef to make a sauce for a salad or a bowl of rice. And everything just kind of tastes better with dressing anyway, right? In the end, the best investment you can do is in yourself. Sometimes you can even pick up a skill which will lead you to a new career. I did not think I'd be a YouTuber making orchid videos, and here I am. I had to struggle though to learn how to edit videos and just navigate this strange job. Imagine if I had someone to help me a bit with filming, video editing, and so on. Give me some pointers and just make the journey start easier. This is why I'm still constantly learning as much as I can about almost anything. I always find ways to incorporate different topics into what I'm doing. And that is why I love platforms like Skillshare. Now you guys, the first 1,000 of you to use the link in the description and in the pinned comment will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So check it out and see which classes will spark your interest. There are no ads to distract you, new classes are launched each week, and the entire catalog is now available with subtitles in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German. So try it out for free at the link below. You have nothing to lose. Thank you Skillshare for sponsoring my video, and thank you guys for supporting the people who support my channel. Alright, back to the video. Alrighty, so before we start, don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it. Why not subscribe? I post multiple times a week and it's free. And if you're feeling extra about it, consider further supporting my channel by becoming a member, checking out the merch, using the affiliate links down below, or using the super thanks option below my videos. Let's get to it, shall we? I have 6 points, I think. Number 1, never mist flowers. Honestly, I would not mist orchids themselves either, since if the stars align, you can cause crown rot, but flowers are even more sensitive, particularly on those big flowered Phalaenopsis orchids, but not only, Cattleya orchids as well, and even Oncidium orchids. The droplets left behind by the mist will not do what you think. They will not increase humidity and make the flowers last longer. On the contrary, they will sit on the flowers, evaporate very slow, and while they're there, they can accumulate pathogens and bacteria that can affect flowers. And there is an ailment called botrytis, which is very, very common in our homes, in flower shops, in cultivation generally, which consists of small fungal dots on orchid flowers, and they're typically gray or dark in color. Imagine having the most beautiful white Phalaenopsis orchid with dark dots on it, and they're not even a pretty color. You can tell it's mold, and I'm sure many of you have seen this in orchids in flower shops, because typically when they water orchids in flower shops, they splash around, they mist them sometimes because they just don't know. Some orchids are more prone to this, specifically the ones with very thin flowers, like the Phalaenopsis. There are some species which have much thicker flowers. Those ones seem to be not so prone to having botrytis, but I wouldn't do it anyway. Why risk making that flower wilt faster when we wait so long for them to appear in the first place? Now, because I know some of you are cheeky and will ask, well, what do orchids do in nature? Well, let's not compare living rooms with nature. First of all, we don't have the same type of water. We have tap water with additives. Nature has rainwater, which is pure and soft, or at least it should be. Then there is wind. We do not have wind to help with water evaporation in our homes. Nature does have some wind. And then let's talk about the purity of the air and the pathogen load in the air in our homes versus nature. Even if they do have their pathogens in nature as well, they have evolved to adapt to those pathogens. In our homes all around the world, we might have very different pathogens which affect orchids much differently than the ones affecting them in nature, to which they became accustomed with. So no water drops on the flowers in our living room. It could lead to botrytis and it will just spoil your flowers. If it's a bad case of it, it can make flowers wilt faster even. Next up, don't pollinate the flowers. Try to resist the urge of obtaining seeds. I know that this can be intuitive to do sometimes, but trust me, you will not get any baby orchids. Seeds of orchids we can easily grow in homes are special. They are very, very thin, very tiny, just like a grain of dust, and are very sensitive and prone to being attacked by fungus and pathogens in the air. They will not sprout if you sprinkle them on sphagnum moss or bark or anything of the sorts. If you put them under a glass, you might think you're keeping things sterile, but you're not. Typically, orchids from seeds are obtained in sterile conditions, facilities that can maintain everything as clean as possible. That seed pod is usually sterilized with either bleach or hydrogen peroxide. It is placed into a special sowing medium consisting of agar and nutritious things. It's like a jelly actually, and all of this happens in a chamber that is as much as possible sterile as well. If you Google it, maybe you will find a video. There used to be an old video showing you the procedure. It's not worth it. If you want to see the seed pod, okay, but it's nothing to write home about really. And the worst part is, not only will the flower that will develop the seeds fade faster and develop the seed pod, but the flower you removed the pollen from can actually wilt faster and fall as well. So if you have an orchid with only 3 flowers, you pollinate 2, you're left with 1 flower and nothing will sprout. Just trust me on this one, or don't trust me, Google it, research it. It's just not worth it. Unless of course you know what you're doing and you're prepared and know how to sow the seeds. Next up, do not move a blooming orchid until all of the blooms are fully open. This might apply a little bit more to Phalaenopsis, but others as well. You see, flowers tend to orient themselves towards the light, just like the orchid. If you move it around while the buds are still opening up, you'll get an orchid with flowers oriented in all directions, including downwards. It happened to me. It's not a nice display, and sometimes it's so bad that you really cannot see the flowers anymore. With Phalaenopsis, it's more important because they can create that beautiful shingling effect, and if you move them, 1 or 2 flowers might start to face downwards or upwards or something of the sort, spoiling the whole effect. Nothing will happen to the flowers, they will not wilt faster or anything, so don't worry about that, but you will just not see the flowers, it's not gonna look pretty. But there is another aspect. If you move the orchid from its location where it's used to being, it got used to the light, it got used to the humidity, the temperature in that place. If you move it suddenly to a place which is kind of different, it might actually abort flowers altogether. It might abort the buds. Some of the flowers might not open properly. They might be a little distorted or tinier and fader, or rather more faded in color. You can have some pretty ugly anomalies if you switch the location of your orchid, so better not to do it. After the blooms are all open, you can move it. Typically the orchid is not so sensitive flower-wise afterwards, but while the buds are still opening, just leave it there, because even flowers can wilt faster if conditions are not right for the entire orchid. Next up, do not spray flowers with any means of pest control. Nothing, not even water-based solutions, oils, I'm not even gonna mention. All of these things will make flowers wilt much faster. And it is kind of related to the first point, but in the case of using oil-based insecticides, even if they're mild and non-toxic and all of that fun stuff, they will still affect flowers. Flowers are very sensitive compared to leaves. The leaves have a thicker cuticle that protects them, while the flowers, the vast majority of them, don't. I wouldn't even try it on the orchids with waxier flowers. So what are we supposed to do with the pests we see in the flowers? Remove them manually as much as possible. Use a bamboo skewer if it will help. Just be gentle, use a Q-tip or whatever you can to remove those pests. because pests as well can make flowers wilt faster, but do not start to spray insecticide on the flowers because you might actually completely destroy them, particularly if it has oils. In my experience, there is only one thing that maybe will not affect flowers, but I would still be super careful with it. That is isopropyl alcohol. This guy, and still, I would use it on much thicker flowers. If I would have a very thin, floofy flower, I would still not use isopropyl alcohol on it. But this works wonders with mealybugs, and maybe sometimes it's worth trying. Other than this, I would not try anything. And even so, if you ever want to try something on a flower, try on one. Don't spray the whole flower spike because they are really, really sensitive. So be very, very careful with all of these insecticidal measures. Whether they're toxic or non-toxic, they can still affect flowers. Next up, do not keep a blooming orchid in hot or cold drafts. I would not keep an orchid anyway in these types of situations, but flowers are even more sensitive. They can dehydrate very fast, so if your orchid is placed in the path of a radiator or very close to a radiator, the flowers can become scorched, kinda. They can dry out and fall. They are pretty sensitive to extreme hot and dry conditions. Likewise, with cold drafts, the cellular wall of the flowers can be affected much faster than leaves can. Coupled with the breeze, you will dehydrate the flowers and also damage them at the same time. Perfect combo. So you can wake up one day with your orchid having no flowers, all of them on the table, just because it was sitting right on top of a radiator or in the path of a draft. So be careful with open windows if it's winter, and also with climate control devices, ACs, radiators, you name it, all of those fun stuff. I know it sounds like I'm making you baby the flowers, but there's nothing worse than waiting an entire year or more, depending, for an orchid to bloom, Maya knows, and then having all of these blooms on the table because I forgot the AC on and it was sitting here and it was blowing on it. I mean, no, I'd rather just make you pay attention to these details. Next up, do not cut the flower spikes and put them in vases and arrangements just because you think they will last longer. They will not. Generally speaking, orchids are not good cut flowers. There are, of course, some exceptions, notably the Dendrobium phalaenopsis and sometimes Vandas, but in my experience, they do not last nearly as much as they would on the orchid. Forget about Cattleyas or Miltoniopsis or even Oncidiums. Those guys fade super fast once you cut the flower spike. But with something like a Phalaenopsis, even though yes, you've seen it in bouquets and I even had it in my wedding bouquet, they just don't last all that long. Phalaenopsis can last for months and even rebloom on an orchid. In a vase, maybe you can have about a week. Maybe a little more, depends how old the flower spike is, how it has been cut, depends on many factors. You'll have better luck with roses, trust me, than with orchids. Now, if you are aware of this and you want to make a nice arrangement on the table, okay, sure, but just be aware, it's not gonna last. So if you are under the impression that you're gonna make it last longer, no, you will not. In the case that the flower spike breaks, obviously put it in water. Let's see how long it lasts, because on the orchid, it won't, it's broken. But just so you know, they don't make good cut flowers. If you're a professional and you're new to orchids, Vandas and Dendrobiums are where it's at, maybe even Phalaenopsis. But Phalaenopsis are expensive, that's what my florist said. Dendrobium Phalaenopsis, not so expensive, they last longer and they're prettier in my opinion. I said it, Dendrobium Phalaenopsis are prettier than phals. Change my mind. And before I let you go, a little bit of myth busting. They say do not touch orchid flowers because you're gonna transfer your oils and you'll make them fade faster. No, you can absolutely touch flowers. You don't have not nearly enough oil to make them fade faster. So don't worry, you can smell them, you can touch them, as long as you're a little careful. You don't break the flower spikes, everything is okay. You don't have enough oil on your hands. And that concludes today's video. I hope you've enjoyed today's topic. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video. And with that said, I hope you'll have a great day and I'll see you next time. Bye!